Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back. And this is episode 262 of the Sample Chapter Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jason A. Meiske, welcoming this week a wonderful guest, somebody that I had a really good time chatting with, and somebody you're going to really enjoy getting to know. Jon McBrine is our guest today. He is a YA sci-fi author who dabbles in superhero action and fantasy adventure. His latest book, Unsecret Identity, came out in September last year, with book 2 coming soon. And we're going to be discussing the background for that book, what got it going. You're going to be hearing about how he likes to write, getting started, having that one friend who knows us well enough to get us on the correct writing path, and so much more. It's a really great conversation, and you're going to really like Jon. He's just very approachable and very friendly, and you definitely want to click those links in the show notes so you can go and find out more about Jon. As for me, I have been writing a little bit. Schedule got a little busy again for the last couple weeks. Missed you last week. A whole lot going on. In addition to got the state fair happening. I took my wife to go see Foreigner the first week of the state fair, which was amazing. Holy cow, those guys are really something. Little known fact, back in 1990, when my wife and I first met, our very first date, I was driving her home, and I Want to Know What Love Is came on the radio. And we both, like in unison, I was just pulling up to a stop sign out in the middle of nowhere, because she lived way out in the country. And I was just pulling up to that when that song came on, and we both were like, oh gosh, I love this song. So just this thought came through my mind. I put the car in park, middle of nowhere. There's nobody out driving around. So I put the car in park, turned up the volume, went around the car, and asked her to dance right there on the highway. I say highway, but it was like, those country 2-lane roads. And right then we had our first dance. And what's really funny is it actually took us a few years to remember what song it was, because we were so wrapped up in the moment, how special it was. But Foreigner and that song have had a special place in our heart ever since. And it was great to get to go and see them in concert. And then this past weekend, in addition to everything else going on at work and school, going back and everything, we got to go back to the state fair, where my wife was honored as for her veteran service. She was the veteran honoree of the day, the only female, I will add, to be honored this year out of the 14 days of the state fair, however long it runs, 2 weeks. So, but yeah, she was the only female, and it was great to get to sit down and listen to them run off all of her accolades and accomplishments that she did while she was serving. And I've always been very proud of her, and it was nice to see the recognition come her way that was richly deserved. So that was cool. Anyway, and then I've been making preparations for coming up here, actually tomorrow as this airs. So it'll be Wednesday, August 21st. I will be at the downtown Third Wednesday Art Walk. This time it's an author art walk. I'm not sure how you want to say it. Author-centric art walk going on downtown Warrensburg. From 5 to 7, I will have a booth there. There will be some other people, other authors I do know that are going to be down there as well. So, yeah, if you happen to be in the area, Wednesday afternoon, the 21st, then stop by and say hi. Well, I think that's going to do it for now. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get on over to our fantastic interview with Jon McBrine. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Hey, welcome back to another exciting episode. Hey, this week we are joined by Jon McBrine, and he's got some really fun books, lots of cool stuff that I can't wait to dive into. So Let me introduce you all. As an author drawn to superhero sci-fi aimed at young adult readers, Jon McBrine adds a unique spin on coming-of-age stories by adding superpowers, snarky villains, and big robot fights. Focused on pure fun and adventure, Jon also showcases the people under the mask and spandex. Jon works in the Dallas area as an author, graphic designer, illustrator, and comic book aficionado. He combines these different fields of work to build interesting projects that capture humor, intrigue, and authentic emotion. His ever evolving career trajectory keeps his sense of wonder alive and his coffee cup full. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the show, Jon McBrine. Hey, Jon.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Been excited about this. Been looking forward to it. And so, yeah, happy to talk to you and have all your wonderful listeners kind of be a fly on the wall for our conversation.
Yeah, and I've been looking forward to it as well. It was fun, getting your email and going over and checking out your books and everything that you have to offer. It's funny how many times I'll get an email from an author who they haven't published yet, and it's like, yeah, I'm writing it, but I want to come on and talk about it. I'm like, oh well, let's come back to that.
Yeah,
Let's circle around. So it's
that
always
is,
fun.
yeah, to have something prepared. It's sort of like I think of it a lot like Shark Tank, where these aren't people who just like, hey, I had an idea last week. I'm gonna go talk to the sharks. Like they already have
Yeah.
a lot of their business, and I'm not trying to oversell myself. Like I have some big business or something. But you know what? I do relate to authors who are just still kind of in that development phase because I was in there. Many authors know this. That process can take a while, and I still feel like I'm a baby author, even though, well, a lot of questions like when did you seriously begin writing, right? um
Mm-hmm.
for me, for this book, Unsecret Identity, Eric Hicker's book one, I first started taking serious notes in 2018. Didn't release the ebook version the until fall of last year, so it was a good chunk of change of time there, you know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
and in that time, the reason you speaking of the authors who's like, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm getting there. That resonates with me because it's very difficult to promote something that isn't actually there yet. And
Yeah.
you want to build like a presence and you want to build buzz, but the fact of the matter is there's really not a product yet. So I
Mm-hmm.
sympathize with all those
Yeah,
aspiring authors.
exactly. Yeah, and I'm a big believer in, the rising tide, it lifts all ships, and
Hmm.
I want to encourage those authors that are reaching out and they're not finished with the book yet, or maybe they're only halfway through, or maybe it's an idea. I want to encourage them. I'm right there for them. It's like, hey, you finish that book, let me know,
Yeah,
and then we're gonna,
yeah,
we'll get you on and all that. But yeah, I mean, because we were all there at one point. It was an idea. We started working on it. My first book took me 8 years before it finally was
yeah.
finished and came to life. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's a road. It's a long road sometimes.
And it could be a lonely one too. So I'm happy to have opportunities to come on podcasts like this, speak to awesome hosts like yourself who kind of give a little showcase for us, at least for myself. These kind of, we're in the grand scheme of things still fairly new. So we're, any
Yeah.
opportunity to come out and just have a nice discussion, talk about authoring, it's always nice.
Yeah. So now you've got a bit of a history with, you know, creators design and comics and storytelling
Mhm.
and whatever. What got you started? Like, what was the day you were like, I want to write a story?
So, like so many authors, you have what I believe to be this kind of innate drive to create in some way. Like, I think a lot of creative people who express their art in so many different ways, they're kind of born with it, and it may take them a while to sort of trial and error processes to discover what they like to do. And for the longest time, ever since I was a kid, I would kind of bounce back and forth. Do I want to write or do I want to draw? And I don't know why in my mind, when I was a kid, I thought it was one or the other. When I'm like there's people who do both. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
and when I was a kid, obviously obsessed with superheroes and comic books and things like that. And so I was like, oh, I'll just make my own comic books when I grow up, which is a fairly common dream amongst, people who like to scribble and doodle. And then I found out drawing comics is really hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't want to draw backgrounds. I didn't know how to draw women. They all look goofy, and so I've gotten better, but it takes a whole lot of practice. So I kind of lean more into writing, but it was a back and forth process trying to decide like how do I want to focus my creative pursuits? Like what do I want to? And it was sort of like this kind of lost in space for a while until a friend of mine, and I'm sure it's the same story with a lot of people, and a great friend who will encourage you to, hey, have you really seriously done this? And like in a real, for like actual for real life attempt at it. And that's kind of basically what happened to me. And I was like, okay, so uh I wrote a short to kind of get my feet wet, and then uh I went ahead and it's like, that idea that's been floating around in my brain since I was like a kid, it's evolved so much. I was like, okay, I think I'm finally just gonna get this story out there. So as I said before, in the fall of 2018, I decided, hey, you know what? I'm actually gonna write this. I started writing notes. Now that in that point in time is a bit of a milestone for me because that's when I decided to go to design school to
Hmm.
become a graphic designer because art is still going to be a major part of my life. And I also found out my wife was pregnant. So I was like, I'm going to school. My wife is pregnant. We're going to have our first child. And I want to write this book. Seems pretty easy. There's not major things going on. So there was kind of a reason why you said 8 years, man. And like for your first book, I mean, like, yeah, it for sure takes some time because sometimes when you're just starting or still continuing, sometimes you carve out 10 minutes before you go to sleep and like, okay, I typed a few words. I'm going to just be unconscious now. And that's how some nights were. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it took a while for sure. And I think what it all roots back to is already having that desire, that passion, that drive, but really, and the already like the really wanting had thought about writing a book. But I do have to credit a good friend of mine who was like, have you actually just tried to just do the novel thing and tried it out and been loving it ever since?
Oh man. God, God bless our friends who see what we should be doing. And
Yeah.
I've got a buddy of mine that I grew up with, and he and I both were always doing art stuff together. But while
Hmm.
he
Hmm.
could come up with stuff, Bren just off the top of his head, he's making these crazy creatures and superheroes and all this kind
Hmm.
of stuff. I was only really good at drawing what I saw. I could
Yeah.
replicate things and do it like that. I just couldn't get what was in my head onto the paper to draw it out. But I could write
Mm.
about it. And I kept wanting to do both. And he would like try and tell me a story about this. He's like, yeah, I don't know what this guy's going to do. And I'm looking at it and I'm inspired. And he's inspired by my stories.
Yeah.
And he finally was telling me, like, you should be writing the stories about this instead. Like, if we ever did a comic, was our plan, then I would write stories and he would do the art. And we could do that stuff. He goes, you'd be really good at the
Yeah.
background stuff. I was like, oh, man. It's like, okay, fine, the background art, whatever. But yeah, it's like we laugh now because I've sent him a couple of my books and he's just like, I told you. I was like, yeah, I know, thank you. It was fun.
Hey, those background artists are unsung heroes, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there must have
But
been something in
yeah.
the air about 2018. That was when I started the
Mm.
show, and that was when my first book came out. So
Yeah,
something going
I
on
don't
that
know.
year.
something was in the water in 2018 where we just decided we're gonna do it, man. We're gonna do it.
There you go. Yep. So let's just start right now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's probably the best advice you can give to anybody is just start. It's gonna suck at first, but you just gotta
mhm.
start.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now you've got a few books under your belt, and I didn't look to see what the timeline was, but are you kind of in the mode of put them out as fast as possible, or are you putting them out when they're ready, like a book a year kind of thing?
So to me, fast as possible sort of eventually inadvertently becomes when they're ready. I don't know. I um would I so this for Unsecret Identity, I delayed it a little bit because I started querying and I have nothing against querying. I think hey, if you can get it, go for it.
Hmm.
Um, but even though I was of course rejected by some literary agents, I looking back, I'm like, yeah, my book wasn't ready yet. I had to go back and make changes, and it was sort of like it didn't feel great to have those rejections, but I also learned from them. So I was like, okay, so I can turn this into something positive and I can make a better book out of it. And so there was some delay there, and I ultimately decided I just wanted to do self publishing. I don't have anything against traditional publishing. Frankly, I would need to know more about traditional publishing to really say one thing or the other about it. But I just made the decision, I'm just going to go ahead and release this. And
Hmm.
whether it was ready, it felt more ready than it had before. But as any author would tell you, these typos, little errors, they come up like there's little gremlins that sneak into your house. They mess with your manuscript just like they mess with cars and things like that.
Yeah. Yep.
But so you'll never and because of that, and again, my my first it was the first real book, and even though it was my passion project, I kind of had to acknowledge this is going to be the practice book. Like this is going to be the learning curve book. So as much as like, oh, this is my dream book, I'm also like, yeah, but it's also going to be the book that had to go through a lot of bumps and bruises to get to where it is now. And the following subsequent titles are probably going to be better simply because as an artist, you evolve and you grow with each thing project you work on. So as I'm learning all this, considering all this, thinking about all these different things, overthinking about all these different things, I I just like I gotta make a decision. Either spend yet another year fine tuning, perfecting this, or just release it because it's as good as it's going to be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I decided, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to release it. And it's the only, if in a perfect world, I would have had hardback, paperback, audio version all at once. But I was like, it'll just be the ebook version. That's fine. First one, launching it out.
There
And
you go.
I've been very happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. And I mean, along the same lines, I learned my lesson about, you finish that, not exactly the first draft, but maybe the
Mm-hmm.
second or third draft and saying, all right, it's done. Let's load it up and put it out there. And then having my wife come to me later, go, what have you done? What is this? And it's like, I've learned that lesson to
Mm-hmm.
don't do that. It doesn't have to be so rushed. But I I don't know. It's like my second book came out pretty quick. I wrote it in like 3 months and spent some time
Mm-hmm.
editing. But my other books, it's like I can write somewhat quickly, except for my series. My series, I'm focused too much on trying to get the timeline right, and of course you got
Mm-hmm.
to catch up with other characters. And oh wait, no, they
Oh
did
yeah.
this then, and they got to do this
Yes.
now.
Yes.
Last time you said this, so that's a little bit trying. But anything new, it's like I can write the initial stuff fairly quick, but I'm finding the value in giving it some time, let it brew for a while, and then come back to it. Because then I'm like discovering, like, oh, I can say this better if I do it this way, and I can do.
Yes.
So yeah, that's been
Yeah.
so yeah.
I definitely understand that. And I'm my output is slow to begin with, so fast as possible is like just whatever my rate of production is. That's technically as fast as possible. I mean, it's like yeah, like and excuse me, and I also do relate to having to think and coordinate with all these ideas you have, and sometimes it becomes difficult. That's why I'm obviously I'm pretty excited to be whenever I get to talk to a fellow author, but I'm talking to people who aren't living in my brain 24/7, who maybe aren't as interested in the nooks and crannies and minute details of what goes on in a manuscript series. It's like
Mm.
sometimes I'm like trying to add to like a friendly casual conversation, but I'm like, I don't know if this person wants to hear about I used that same word on page 47 as I did in 217. I should go back and change that word. And now that character reacted this way in the first chapter. So it doesn't make sense for them to react this way in chapter 27. Like these little crazy little details that's like,
Hmm.
it is like sometimes I'm like, oh, you're pretty quiet, John. I'm like, yeah, because this is all I want to talk about. It's the only thing going on in my brain right now, and I'm pretty
Right.
sure you're going to be bored to tears. So I'm just going
Uh,
to leave it alone.
I spent 3 hours the other night obsessing over how to do a title of a short story, whether or not to
Yes.
add the, whether or not to make the word inside it plural or singular, and then if it was even the right title. And I'm telling my wife, and the first hour she was looking at me going, "Are you serious?" But by hour two, she was like in it with me, and she's like, "How did you drag me into this?" And by the end of the third hour, I came back to the original title that I was gonna do. I was like, "Okay, you know what? That's the title. There we go." And finally
Man,
got it submitted. So
these are the things the creative types, authors, writers, whoever. These are the things we obsess over. Like, should the be there? Like it's seriously. And I went back and forth with titles of mine, and even like even things that I realized I'm like, I don't know who else is going to read this. I don't know if any other humans ever going to read this, but it's going to be perfect. Even though what's the saying? Perfection is the enemy of progress. There's something kind of like that. It's kind of I'm trying to like realize this more, but I'm like, man, it's just not going to sit well, And like, should I add the series title? Should it be a standalone? So I know you go to any bookstore or library and just now I'm thinking, I look at these book titles, I'm like, I wonder how many hours the author spent agonizing.
yeah, exactly. Well, so Unsecret Identity, book one of the Eric Icarus series, came out in September. It appears to be doing really well, and it's got a really catchy bio to it that really has my attention. I can't wait to dive into it myself. Where did Tell us a little bit about this book, and how was what was the impetus behind it?
So I'll go ahead and read you the elevator pitch, the blurb that in a city of high-tech heroes, Eric's power is the real deal. Can he keep his flying a secret while posing as a maskless superhero when a maniacal villain emerges from his past? So what drove me to write this story about a teen superhero who has a miraculous, unexplained, real gift of flying, a real superpower, in a city with a super team that uses high tech armor and other equipment. This is one of these ideas when I'm a kid playing with action figures, and I was like, I don't know when exactly the idea sprung to my head, but I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool if there's been other characters who fly, of course, but I really like the idea of a character whose power is only just to fly. And I was like, as amazing as that would be, it'd also be kind of a challenge because just because you can fly doesn't mean you can't get your butt kicked. So there are limitations even with the gift of flight, and I really wanted to create a world where amazing things are already happening, not necessarily a commentary on society or anything, but you know, I did consider that while developing the book and the story, where I really wanted this kid to represent a lot of my. It's not a self-insert, but of course, there's going to be things that represent aspects of my own experience in the story, and I really wanted Eric, the main character, to have this special ability that no one else has and still not feel like he is special himself, even though he can fly, for crying out loud. But there's already so many amazing pieces of technology in this city, and New St. Cloud City is where the main setting of the story. And like I said, there's already a superhero team that exists. And with their high tech equipment, they're performing these amazing feats. And there's drones flying through the city. It's a very futuristic city. And so you have this shy kid, the shy 14-year-old, who basically wakes up one day and realizes he can float, hover, and fly. He has no idea why. And he still doesn't feel like he is the most amazing thing on like the entire planet. And he also discovers that he literally can't stop flying. His weakness is essentially gravity. I like to say he's allergic to gravity. And the longer he's grounded, this mysterious pain spreads across his entire body, causing him to feel agony. And so he can't really blend in with anybody. He's constantly has to be floating, and he doesn't understand why. If he just stands still on the ground, his body will just attack him from the inside. So there's a lot of mystery surrounding his abilities and his weaknesses, but he discovers that he's never going to be able to be normal or blend in. So what he decides to do is take a friend's advice, that's a running theme, and join a superhero team. And he doesn't want his flying ability, his mysterious natural flying ability, to be discovered. So he joins his flying team, and to the public, he wears an anti-gravity backpack, which is really just a decoy. So he's hiding in plain sight, or hiding in plain flight, and going to join a superhero team. And I like to say it's real power, fake superhero. And it's so Eric thinks he's in the clear. He can just float around as a superhero, doesn't even need to wear a mask. Mask wouldn't do him any good anyway. But he also finds out that there's a lot more to being a superhero than just getting to play dress up and getting people to think you wear a backpack that lets you zip around the city.
That's awesome. So now you were saying that flying is his only superpower. So there's no super strength, there's no invulnerability, none of that. That's fascinating.
And yes, and as the series will progress, more will come out, more mysteries will be, solved, and as he evolves as a character. And but I thought, what if Superman could only fly? Now, there's guys like, I'm a big comic book nerd, so there's guys like Hawkman and Angel. They have wings and things like that. They're I never wanted to say like I'm the first person to ever write about a flying superhero or anything like that, but I did want to add my unique twist on it, my spin on it, my voice on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the concept of having like one of Superman's powers is very interesting to me, because you put them all into one guy, pretty powerful dude. But if you have an inexperienced kid who he has no combat training or anything like that. He just decides,
Right.
hey, I can fly. And in his special case, he kind of has to always be afloat, or some mysterious pain will just cause him, like, as if he's being punished for trying to be normal. And he's this kid, already this shy kid. He has his mystery powers, doesn't know anything about it. So I really, like I said, just got really fascinated by the idea of not having an invulnerability, not having heat vision or anything like that, just flying, and how this just amazing power can still it doesn't guarantee you're going to be able to beat up a bad guy. And
Right.
that just became really interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's really tapped into like my like high school day nightmares of I could fly and I'm flying through the school, but then all of a sudden I run into a ceiling fan and I'm not invulnerable. So now I just
Oh
crack
yeah.
my head and I'm falling. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm in my underwear. And it's like,
Yeah.
why am I?
Yeah.
It's just like, it was never, your dreams were like, yeah, you get this one little thing, kind of like this. You can fly, but that's it. Maybe some
Yeah.
football jock jumps up and grabs you and pulls you down, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, there's just no winning.
Yeah. And it's exactly that. It's every high school, middle school insecurity you may have. And like basically imagine you at the most vulnerable you've ever been and will be in your entire life, the most self-conscious you're ever going to be. And you take a kid like Eric who doesn't want anyone to notice him, and now he can't help but be noticed. And so he's the only kid who would think being able to fly kind of sucks. And, he's like, yeah, this isn't as great as it's cracked up to be. But luckily, he joins a super team with fellow teen heroes who also have special equipment, but his is the real deal, and he has to keep that a secret. So it's
That's awesome.
yeah. So yeah, one of these ideas I just floated around in my brain. Finally got it. Finally got it down.
I love it. I love it. That is really cool. Well, how's book two coming along?
Book two is technically already finished. I already wrote book two. In fact, book one of the early drafts, was basically too long, especially for a YA. Uh, and so, as you're developing and learning and stuff like that, I've learned that in writing and being an author, uh, there's the only real rule is to have someone enjoy your book, really. I
Hmm.
think, and rule number two is to sell books. So that those kind of go hand in hand. So that's the only real book, because there's plenty of books where they don't follow norms and yet they sell like gangbusters. So you're like, there are exceptions, but I will say there are things, maybe expectations and stuff like that. And I was like, well, on the one hand, I kind of want to write what I want to write. True, but that first draft was pretty long, and I'm like, for a debut, some guy out of the blue decided to publish a book, decided to have a kind of a long first book for a YA audience. So yeah, let's go and split this. So I spent a lot of time, another delay for this book. Spent a lot of time reworking it, adding and writing a lot more content, to where I got really satisfied and really happy with the decision to split the book. And so I have book two, and I'm actually kind of in a similar situation with you said you when you released your book two, I have my book two essentially ready to go, and I'm having to make the decision of when am I going to release book two if I already have it? How long do I give it? Like,
Ah,
and everybody's going to give you a different answer on that, no matter who you ask. Some people say, oh, wait a year. And some people say, get it out right now while there's buzz. And it's just a decision you have to make. And I'm not entirely sure yet.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I did book one, I had so much fun with it and I dove right into book two. I thought, okay, I'll have two, like maybe one or two books a year in the series, and that was the idea. But it took me almost, oh gosh, it took me a year and a half before book two came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, it just, well, part of the too was that since I didn't plan it out, I just had it in my head. I had
Mhm.
ideas for each book, but like I got to near halfway and something wasn't working, hadn't been working for a few chapters. I knew that. And when I finally sat back and looked at it, I figured out, oh, he my hero is in a place that he's not supposed to be yet. That's what I had written for book 3. I'm crossing over my ideas. So I
Oh,
had to go through, yeah, so I had to go through and finally map out, okay, book 2 I want this to happen, book 3 I want this to happen, couple of books like that, and then each one I had to kind of plan out just a little bit, a general idea of here's what's going to take place. So then I take all that out and then essentially start over from like chapter 6 on book 2
mm,
and go from there. And it was just big hang up, and it kind of dragged me down there for a little bit, but I got there
yeah,
eventually.
yeah, and yeah, it's important just to keep pressing on. Just you know, it's a daunting task, but it's a fun one. Ultimately, it is fun. As much stress is involved with it, it's still something I believe authors just enjoy doing. Like you
Hmm.
can sell no books, you can sell a million books, you're probably still going to want to just write.
Yeah,
and that's and
exactly.
that's what we do. That's what
Absolutely.
we do for sure.
Well, so I'm having a blast with you here, and I have a feeling we could talk for hours, but I probably ought to wrap this up here pretty quick. But first, I have a little would you rather question for you.
Okay, okay.
This is the author version. So, would you rather publish one insanely great selling book and never write again, or publish a string of 15 average selling books over a 20-year career?
Oh man, that is tough. Uh Boy, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here because obviously I'm too much of an overthinker. So too many variables are coming into my brain right now.
Right? Yeah.
So
It's like, show me the
I
money or show me the career.
yeah, so me. Oh man. Um I think I would my initial thought was just to go for like the one great one.
Hmm.
So because that was my initial thought, I guess I'll go with that. But I did immediately start thinking about like, well, you know, if you churn out book after book, you can make a living. And you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like there's like the two halves of the brain are like, which one do I want to do? You know? So like
Yeah.
I'll just go with the thing that first popped into my brain, and that was just to have the one singular book, even though there's the other part of me that's like, yeah, if you can quantity over quality, man, let's just go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's kind of the Finding Forrester point of it.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, one book out the gate. Okay, I've made my career off that book, and now I can just go fishing or something like that. It's
Yeah.
whatever. Spend my day
Yeah,
doing
for
that.
sure. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Difficult. It's a difficult one, but yeah. Oh man, you have these hard questions.
And and it really is because like had they not thrown in the and never write again, that's the caveat for me. It's like, oh, but I would
It's
really
like,
want to
really?
keep writing. It's like I still want to write
Yeah.
even for myself or for my kids or grandkids or whatever. I would still
Yeah.
have that itch to write, even if I had nothing ever sold. But
Yeah. And you know, when I first started writing on Secret Identity, which was just called Fly when I first was writing it, just the word fly. And I was like, is he a fly girl? Is he the fly with Jeff Goldblum? And like, what is happening? So I had to rethink the title. But when I was very first started writing it, I was like, I just want to release something to say that I did it. And
yeah,
technically, I did meet that goal, but I have a kind of like a personal internal catchphrase. It's "You're not going to like me very much." When I think about that, I'm like, this could like, oh, I'm done, one and done. Then I hear this voice in my brain go, "You're not going to like me very much," because this could be a series. Like, oh crap! All right.
that's awesome. Well, John, where can people find and follow you, buddy?
Easiest thing to do is go to jonmcbrine.com, just JONMCBRINE. Um, and that will direct you to everything that I'm doing and the social media biggest one, I'm all over the place, but I would say the biggest one is to go on Instagram. It's at Jon _McBrine _author. Remember those underscores.
Perfect. Yep. And everybody, I'm going to have links to that in the show notes so that way you know right where to go and where to find his books and of course his Instagram. We'll have it all right there. But don't forget to check back next week when Jon returns with a sample chapter from Unsecret Identity. Jon, thank you so much for joining me. And this has been a blast, man. I wish you all the best with book 2 and the rest of your writing career.
All right. And same to you. Happy to be on.
Thank you so much. All right. So until then, until next week, everybody, take care.